Our next speaker in this morning's session is Mark Chang. Mark is here from Franklin Olin College of Engineering, where he's assistant professor of electrical and computer engineering. His PhD from the University of Washington, master's from Northwestern University, and a bachelor's from Johns Hopkins University. And reading his CV, I see that he's an expert in computer-aided design and does a lot of research in a variety of areas there. But today, I think he's here to talk to us about the very innovative curricula and implementations at Olin College. So please welcome Mark.
So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Olin College and some of its curriculum, and hopefully tie it back to comments Wendy and Bob and Dr. Lane had yesterday and today. We do have a very hands-on curriculum, so what I'm doing right now is fairly uncomfortable, which is pretend I'm some sort of actor in front of a large audience. So if you all could do me a favor and interrupt me, ask me some questions, try to get me to engage in the material that is actually quite static behind me, and you'll see me look behind myself to figure out what I'm talking about. I really want it to be a dialogue, hopefully, so feel free to interrupt me anytime, or else I'll just drone on and you'll all regret that you didn't ask me questions. We have a session a little bit later, so if you want to ask any specific questions that don't fit into this talk, then feel free to come over around 10:30 or so. So Olin College is a relatively new college. I believe it's the newest engineering college in the United States. We broke ground in 1997 when the school was chartered in the state of Massachusetts. And our basic goal, inspired by Friedman's book, all these reports of the impending doom and disaster of United States innovation, the board from the Franklin W. Olin Foundation decided, well, we need to try to infuse innovation into engineering education at the undergraduate level. And so if you can imagine for a moment, I know that I have felt, and perhaps some of you have felt, that you are an island of care, an island of empathy, and an island of I want to teach among a sea of I don't want to teach, or among a sea of no, you shouldn't teach, and actually it's not in your best interests to teach. You should probably do more research, or you need to teach to the tests we're giving to your K through 12 students and those kinds of things. And so if you can imagine for a moment that you could create a small utopia that is all of us, get together, given a lot of money and said, go. All that stuff you promised that you would do, all those dreams you had, well, we're going to hold you to them now. And so we're going to get you some students, we're going to get you some buildings, and really you have to prove to us that you're not just spouting a bunch of garbage, that what you want to do is actually innovative and interesting. And so that's kind of the story of Olin College. So to start there, we have to start with the actual person. And so to pay homage to actually Franklin W. Olin, he was an entrepreneur and engineer, professional baseball player on the side. In his work as an entrepreneur, he produced ammunition and gunpowder for the US Army during World War I. Perhaps because of that guilt of war profiteering, as Alfred Nobel, I'm just speaking on my behalf, not his. He founded the Olin Foundation, the Franklin W. Olin Foundation, in the early 30s. And over those 50 years between when they started and when they closed their doors, they gave around $800 million to various colleges, 56 different campuses. They made 78 different buildings. So on a lot of campuses like Stanford or Johns Hopkins or all these places, you'll see Olin Hall. It's usually Olin Hall of Chemistry, Biology, Engineering, those kinds of things. And their goal was really to try to influence positive engineering education. Franklin W. Olin graduated from Cornell as an engineer, and he kind of just bootstrapped his way in. He wasn't really trained as an engineer, and he really felt that he was given a huge opportunity to be a successful person and entrepreneur because of his education. He wanted to give that back to everybody. And so in 1997, Larry Milas, the director of the Franklin W. Olin Foundation, after giving away tons of money, said, okay, that's it. I want to affect engineering education even more deeply because of the reports that Dr. Lane was talking about. And he decided that they wanted to create their own college. And so we can take all the best ideas that they've been hearing from all over the world, just stick them in one place and see if it will grow. And so that's what they did. And so what they did was brought together several people. Our first hire was President Rick Miller in 1999, employee number 1, the former Dean of Engineering at the University of Iowa. And we said, okay, you pick some faculty. So a number of faculty were stolen away from places like MIT and Stanford and other places and said, you wanted to teach, now you get to. And then we also said, how about we grab some kids because you need someone to teach. So we convinced these 30 fairly radical young people who are just graduating high school somehow convinced their parents that it was okay to come to a place that didn't exist, was simply a grassy hill with a few trees on it, and we haven't come up with a curriculum yet. And in fact, we're not going to before you get here. President Rick Miller actually drafted the first Olin curriculum, wrote it all down, printed it all out, opened his drawer, stuck it in there, shut it, locked it. That was his idea, and he didn't want to influence any of the faculty with what he thought was a good way to go about teaching our undergraduates. And so we got these 30 people. We call them the Olin Partners, and they spent time literally in trailer homes in Needham, Massachusetts, as we were building what was behind them, the first buildings, trying to work together with faculty and have that kind of incubated anthropological event, which was, how do people learn? How can we best teach them? And more than anything, we realized we can break kids in a lot of different ways, in a whole host of ways. You can treat them like grad students and just assume that you don't ever need to talk to them about anything, and that works for about 6 weeks until they get frustrated and they're all crying and it's a disaster. You can do all sorts of different things, and hopefully the motto of the kind of college is that failure is an option, failure is expected, and the only way you can make progress is to try something, see it break, try to fix it, try it again. So I believe that we have a culture that is very failure tolerant and very autonomous. And so fast forward a couple years from 2001, we actually do have buildings now. We don't have many, we only have 5. 2 of them are residence halls. It's a tiny little college. We have currently 344 students total, 32, 35 faculty, depending on how you count it. Our president teaches, our provost and dean, they also teach. They're always in the classroom. So we've got buildings, we've got a campus, we've got stuff. We put stuff in it. And we got about 75 acres of campus, 350 students now, 350 alumni, which is good. And here's our first class. And so I put this picture here because this is our goal. This is our singular goal. And I'm very fortunate to be among faculty, staff, and administration whose singular goal is this: educating undergraduates in engineering. We don't have any other goals. Well, we do, of course, but this goal we are all on board with. The people we hire, if you aren't behind this goal, we don't want to see your resume. And so we are here to try to make engineering education better. We're here to be a place where experimentation can happen, and we definitely work with techniques that Wendy was talking about and try to bring the laboratory and the real world setting into the classroom. We love what Bob is doing. We get to design our own building, so we don't have really many tiered classrooms. We have one big auditorium where everybody can sit because there's like 380 seats, so we can all meet there if something happens. And we also have one, I think, tiered classroom, which I was assigned to this semester to teach in. And sometime over winter break, I got about half a dozen emails. Whoa, are we in that tiered classroom? Because I don't want to be in that classroom, from students. And so they're like, whoa, can we please be in a design studio? Could we please be in some other space than that horrendous thing, which I don't understand why we have? And so here's our inspiration. Well, if you design a college, you get to design the mission as well. Most of us don't. Most of us come to a place and say, oh, our mission is, you don't know. It's in the student handbook somewhere, which you don't get. And so our mission, as it's evolved over the years, is we prepare students to become exemplary engineering innovators who recognize needs, design solutions, and engage in creative enterprises for the good of the world. So if we tease out some of the important things in here, we have engineering, we have needs, we have design, we have creativity, and we have, my favorite, good of the world. And so if we can take these things and we say, well, we need a framework to build our curriculum around that. We can say, well, they have engineering, we have design, we have business and entrepreneurship, which was a really big component of what Franklin W. Olin was about, and we have the arts and humanities to kind of influence and understand how people consume products, how people act, and how people behave. And all of our stuff that we might make as engineers needs to live in the hands of people, so it's really important we talk about that. This is kind of the linearized, simple version. This is the obvious version. We took the words on the previous slide, made them vertical and bigger, right? So it's not a huge reconceptualization of how we might create curriculum. Another way to think about this is to think about from an industry perspective. How is a product popular? How is a product actually adopted by the public? There's some component of the product that needs to be desirable. You need to want it, and it needs to serve some need or perceived need of a person or a group of people. It does need to be viable. I can make you the best toothbrush in the world, and if it's $5 million, it's probably not viable. So you need to actually consider the economics and the business proposition of whether or not what you want to build, given the need from people, is actually viable within the market. And finally, we have the feasible, which is the technical component. Can it be done? The dollars and cents have to work, people have to want it, and you actually, if it needs to be made out of dilithium crystals or antimatter, we probably can't do it yet. And so the technical is something that is actually a really big component. So another way to think about this question is a pretty typical engineering design flow, which starts from requirements and leads to specification. And from a specification, we can hand it off to real engineers and say, go build this, and it'll be fantastic. Another way to conceptualize this is to kind of expand the definition of engineering to encompass those three lobes in that little Venn diagram that I put together, to start with people and end in the market. That's essentially what we're doing, right? If we think about it from an industry focus or a product focus or a service, we need to understand, what do people actually need? So what are their values? How do they work? How do they live? What is their goal in life? How do we make their lives better? A very anthropological or ethnographic perspective on needs of people. From the people, we have needs. Then once we have needs, we can design things that are required. Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking people and their needs, but in your previous slide, you didn't have any social sciences.
Right. We do have social sciences. You'll see that in a second. Thanks. Remind me if I don't get to that. So people, needs, and only from the needs of actual people and their values can we actually design requirements. This needs to make someone feel proud about being an engineer. This needs to make someone feel good about being able to demonstrate their ability to use a computer, for example. From those requirements, we can build prototypes, make specifications, but most importantly, go all the way through the process and say, how does this land in the market? Is it viable? How do you market to people? What kind of demographics are we actually going to tackle? And so I think it's fair to assert that in a lot of places, engineering design or engineering curriculum focuses on this lobe, which is the feasible or the technical. We're really concerned with what's possible. NSF funds that. We love it. And it's a fantastic place to be as an engineering science researcher. What is the frontier of knowledge? And I'm not saying that that's not bad. That's fantastic. But a lot of times we kind of focus perhaps too much of our educational responsibilities to young people in this lobe. And so we do have, if you look at this flow, the narrow flow, it suggests that what engineers do is only this section, right? We go from requirements to specification. And because of that, when we design some sort of curriculum, we start with just this little bit. And it's technically focused, it's feasibility understanding, and we drive our curriculum by saying, it's all based on content. It's all based on content. We must deliver content, an ever-growing amount of content, into young people's minds. The technological revolution has yielded exponential growth in the amount of stuff we could learn, and therefore it seems irresponsible to think that we could keep cramming that into a 4-year experience. And so in some ways, content is king. In some ways, that content should not really drive a curriculum, because this narrow description of what engineering is, engineering education, therefore, is a little bit kind of narrow. It doesn't actually include the top and the bottom that we're talking about, which is what people want and how they will purchase it or how they will actually utilize it in their economies. And so content is not king. It leads to a lot of issues. Perhaps one of them that we're most familiar with is this really engaged young woman. You can't see, but she's poring over a thermodynamics textbook right now, and she's closing her eyes deep in thought, trying to understand kind of some equation. And in a moment in the video here, eyes will pop open, and that light bulb will go on over her head, and we will have, poured the water into the vessel, and she will have knowledge. Unfortunately, that's probably not how it works. As we talked about with Bob yesterday, the millennials, if you want to categorize them in some way, content is no longer king. Content is everywhere. I can go onto Wikipedia, wrong or right. Content is free. The commodification of information and knowledge makes it so that my job as the broadcaster or the reader is just that, someone who reads from something and then they all transcribe it. It's not really particularly engaging. So the shift is really from an object focus or a content focus to a people focus. So we can take a look here. People drive our idea of values, which lead into requirements. And the actual product starts from the requirements, leaks into people, and gets all the way down into specifications. More importantly, what we want to do is we want to, on the right-hand side, your left-hand side, that's really odd. Look over there. We want to look at people so that we design the right thing. There's no need in this world for another widget that does the same thing that your current widget does, except for more expensive or whatever. We don't need to sell you anything that you don't need. So we want to design the right thing, and we want to take engineering principles and specification requirements and all that kind of stuff and make sure we design it right. So if we take a look at our curriculum a little bit, here's the spaghetti noodly version of it. I know it's very difficult to see. The threads are on the top, the kind of the 4 major categories, which include mathematics, sciences, engineering, science, design, and context. This is our framing as an engineering college. And so the context part is where we bring in as much arts, humanities, and social sciences as possible. We're very lucky to be partnered very closely with both Brandeis, Babson, and Wellesley College, all fantastic institutions that have significant amounts of liberal arts. And so almost all of our students spend a lot of time on those 3 campuses getting what we cannot offer, which is a really deep, contextful, and rich kind of liberal arts education. So we do send them out. We have a strong requirement for social sciences, and it's a big component of understanding people. And so we draw that people component into engineering. There is an expectation that you will be engaging people, and you need to get over into the arts humanities side to learn about how people work. And so we have a number of arts humanities faculty on board. We have an anthropologist, historians, writers, technical writers, and so we have some on our campus, but we do have all these other campuses to leverage, which is fantastic for us. And so all the things in blue are classes that all of our students have to take. This is kind of time from top to bottom. The last thing is our senior capstone, which you have to look on the side walls to see. And so design thread progresses through the entire curriculum. Mathematics, engineering, sciences, and arts humanities persist through the entire curriculum. And so I'm just going to spend the next 8 or so minutes talking about one of the threads, and that is the design thread that runs through our curriculum. Yes?
I was just wondering, are those other schools also sending you students?
Yes, we have a cross-registration agreement with those colleges.
So how many of your graduates actually started as engineers versus did 2 years as in liberal arts college?
All of our students start with us. We don't have any students transferring in. We don't have a real strong transfer in policy. We basically have to start over. We have a number of students who already have their BAs from other places who have started over as first-year students at Olin after discovering they didn't want to or were really interested in engineering.
So what about the Wellesley students?
The Wellesley students can obtain cross-registration credit if they come take our classes. I lead what is our intercollegiate relations committee, and we have a certificate in engineering studies that they can be certified if they take a course sequence that's roughly minor sized. And so a lot of their students, a lot of Babson students come over and want to steep themselves in design or electrical engineering or robotics or something like that. And we do offer some sort of credential to make it worth their while for taking classes on our campus. It's kind of in the spirit of balance of trade. A lot of our students go to Wellesley, so we want to entice as many Wellesley students to come onto our campus. And so I will talk really quickly about the design thread, and I could talk about this offline with any of you. So we'll start with a class called Design Nature. The idea in Design Nature is really focusing on the middle component. We need to go through the whole flow, right? We go from people down to products, but that middle component early on is what students can really need to grapple with. Before you can build the thing, you need to understand the process of teamwork, the process of engineering, the process of coming up with requirements, and how do you go from that to actually specification. And so instead of making it arbitrary, we say, go be inspired by the natural world. You can see these examples. People looked up in the sky and saw birds. They built airplanes. People looked in the ocean and saw swimming things. They built submarines. That kind of idea as applied to the requirements are, it needs to fly, it needs to swim, it needs to crawl, it needs to jump. And then your job as a student is to go from there to actually something that does fly, swim, crawl, or jump. Some of the examples, and so this is very process focused. Some of the examples are, if you look from left to right, one of the things that we have students go out, we have a wetland preserve right next to our college. They go out into the wetland preserve, hopefully don't come back with too many ticks or Lyme disease, and they see click beetles. And we ask them to go find click beetles, sketch click beetles, understand the physiology of click beetles. Click beetles are small animals that can jump 20, 30, 40 centimeters by snapping their spines open. And so they can actually jump many times their height. And so they can store tremendous amounts of energy and release it in a controlled fashion, which is a fantastic engineering principle. So our students, they go into the field, they understand how does that work. In the second column, you see that they're ideating on how they would build that in sketch models. How do you store energy and release it in a controlled fashion? From that kind of large-scale ideation, there's a down select in terms of convergence into a couple models, which they actually build foam models so they can kind of play out the physics of it. From that, they go into a refinement stage where they might go into divergent thinking. They come back, they actually take that model, put it into a CAD software like SolidWorks, and physically model its ability to jump. So they have a prediction. As you see, there's a graph that says, this thing should jump this high because I've modeled all the forces on this. And this is actually the first year curriculum. After that, they go into the machine shop. They use the laser cutters or the water jet cutters, and they build their prototypes out of Delrin, steel, or whatever they want to build it out of. And they go through a number of iterations to figure out, oh, that was totally a bad idea. Yeah.
Is this single students or are they in?
These are in teams. And so this is a lot about the process of teamwork, the process of planning, the process of scheduling, the process of taking their engineering science and actually applying it into the physical world. And so our example here is one of our students from 2007, Jeff. And here's he placing the actual click beetle he built in the upper left-hand corner. And it waits, which is a requirement that it can't just simply explode after you leave it. It has to have a semi-controlled release. And then it hops. And then he seems fairly happy about it. The teams are, in design nature, they're fairly they're crafted by faculty, and they are supposed to be gender balanced, kind of skill balanced, and those kinds of things. So I believe the teams are on the scale of 3 or 4. This is a class that all students have to take. And so we have the hopper, we have the crawler, which you get something like this, and you get happy canned shot footage of students having their things climb up the wall. They use suction cups and bellows and geared motors, all of which, if you look here, are all fabricated on campus. And then there's the swimmer version, where you try to make something that actually swims underwater in some way, has some sort of locomotion underwater. And we added a component of, you actually have a customer in this case, 4th and 5th graders. It needs to be fun, whatever fun is. So we bring an entire school over, and there's pools all over the academic center, and the kids are judging. You see there should be kids there with like clipboards, and they judge, this one was fun, this one was not fun. And so there is we've kind of started layering on in the more recent years a little bit more of the person perspective. In this case, your customer, client, or your target demographic is the 4th or 5th grader, which is not who you are, which is good.
And how long does this last? Is this a 1 semester or a full year?
It's a 1 semester experience. And so it's part of their first year experience. Entrepreneurship is really important at Olin. I'm just running out of time, so I'll whiz through this, unfortunately. We do have a very hands-on environment. We have an entire building where students run it. It's called the Foundry. We have expert advisors. We have funding. We have offices where if you want to start a company, and it's something that's a lot of our students do take advantage of. They have requirements in business and entrepreneurship, and in particular this class, we require them to start a company and run it. So we give them a few $100, $500, $600 to start a company. They go build stuff, buy stuff, and they sell it to the community, and they try to make a profit. And so it's all about the running of a business. And we have had a number of successful businesses that come out. You might recognize the Big Belly. They're all over the city of New York, the city of Boston, city of Philadelphia, I believe. And Leighton Ige on the right-hand side has a really successful business. He lives in Hong Kong in terms of manufacturing materials and goods for people that do yoga and meditation. The thing that I do want to talk about in the last minute is kind of user-oriented design. And so our curriculum is centered on design a lot. And one of the aspects that we try to get is that top half. How do you engage people? And so one of the experiments and the outcomes, we'll give you an example, is students are assigned a demographic. And they are supposed to go out and study this user group and figure out how to improve their lives with some service or product. This demographic was, what's this? Courier. Right, not buildings, couriers, so bike couriers. And so the students need to go out into the real world, frightening. They're sophomores at this stage. They need to go find bike couriers. Luckily, we live in Boston. There are some. They need to engage them in their space. They have to go to the bike shop. They have to go to the courier headquarters. They have to talk to these individuals. They have to devise reasonable ways to kind of enter that community and become part of that community, a very anthropological or ethnographic approach. There are a lot of pitfalls that students figure out in terms of talking to people. The approach, hi, I'm from Olin College. I'm doing a study on people. Could I talk to you? Especially with cool bike messengers yields, no. Like, go away. Some of the techniques that students eventually figure out is that if you divide and conquer, Cool is a big component of bike messengers, and if you meet them all in their space, they're not going to talk to you because that's just not very cool. But if you take them to lunch and they're by themselves, they love to talk to you. Leveraging the component of people like talking to other people is actually very important. So you see that students learn about what their artifacts are. What are they looking at? What are they doing? How do they feel? What do they work with? What is their environment? We have a lot of techniques, and they work in teams, about 4 on this entire semester. A lot of techniques for interviewing, a lot of techniques for understanding, a lot of techniques for framework building, ideation, concept creation, and those kinds of things. We do a lot of word mood card synthesis to understand, to try to squeeze out everything the students have learned from talking to their user groups and really understand what's important to those people. We're not doing a scientific study like a real anthropologist. So we want to understand and work with people to understand what their value system is. And so some of the prototypes that they came up with in the early stages, they need to lock their bike. So I'm going to make a little ring that attaches to the lock when they can reach down and pull the thing off, and it will unlock. And it'll be super fantastic. Or I could make a helmet that has an airbag in it to keep them safe so that they don't get killed, as many of them seem to get very hurt being bike couriers. You take this back with a design kit and work with the actual individuals and looking at the prototypes. And those 2 things they looked at and said, whoa, no way. A, I don't wear a helmet, so whatever. 2, I don't lock my bike. Don't you see me? I take my bike, I go into the elevator with it, and I go upstairs and I come back. I don't have time to lock my bike. Those 2 ideas are stupid. So I think that the students really go, oh, these were awesome. They were really good. Oh, we didn't do a good job understanding what your context function was and how you actually do your work. And so they kind of iterate over and over again, and what they find out is that, this is what they actually want. They want to listen to their iPod, they need to listen to their dispatch radio, and this is before a lot of technology made this really easy. They don't want to use Bluetooth headsets because that's another battery that they need to, and it's something that will fly off their ear, and it's really hard to actuate because they have huge gloves because Boston's cold. And so they need something that can be operated without their fingers, and they need something that they can switch between their music and their dispatch radio. So this thing is just mounted on the strap of their messenger bag. They can hit it with their palm and twist it. They can hit it with their palm and adjust the volume. There's a tap to switch the input, a twist to adjust the volume. It's not uncool. It addresses their needs and addresses their values in terms of being able to listen to music, and addresses kind of a safety need that, hey, you probably don't want to be fumbling with a lot of cables while you're riding down the middle of the road. And so the culmination of the kind of enterprise is in the SCOPE project, which is our senior capstone design project, which is a year-long project that is engaging industry. So our hope is that they have found out enough things along the way that we have imported, as Wendy had said, enough of the real world into our classrooms, such that they are somewhat pre-professional engineers, and they can, we hope, engage real engineers and real companies. And so we have sponsored work, very much taken from the Harvey Mudd Clinic model, but almost wholly imported with their permission. And the idea is we have sponsored work, and the students are the point of contact. I fly cover to make sure nothing disastrous happens, but the students are doing all the work, they're doing all the communication with the sponsoring company. We have lots of different things. A lot of them are design focused. We do things like, on the left, very bioengineering, new sensors for detecting diseases in urine, to new, on the right-hand side, indoor stoves revamped for rural Guatemala. And so students are looking at how these wood-fired stoves, how can you make new ones, how can you really address the needs of people that have low income and really need to cook in an enclosed indoor environment. And we do technical things. This is our DARPA Grand Challenge vehicle from a few years ago, which our students built and partnered with MIT and other places. It got 4th place. And the students actually do a lot of other cool stuff where they actually are using their user-centered techniques and really annoying surgeons by going into the surgery rooms and watching surgeries happen and trying to figure out how doctors work with medical devices. And so we have a lot of support from Boston Scientific on that, where they make a lot of endoscopic probes and things like that. And so the students are in there. I have no idea what they're poking, and I don't want to know. But the idea is that they get into these situations, they try to understand what the context is, and they try to build things that are applicable to, in this case, surgeons. Sometimes these approaches don't work because the companies hate the idea of user-centered design. Like, whoa, you're not going to talk to our doctors. That's not going to happen. And a lot of the times, the companies are very open and say, oh, why we never tried that? Sounds like a good idea, talking to your users. I I'm supposed to like that, so we'll go with it. And I think we've had a number of successes, and this is ongoing. We've got a lot of separate partners. I think the message that I'm trying to say is that this is what happens when you say all the faculty, your job is to make engineering innovative, engineering education innovative. We're going to give you as many resources as we can. We're going to put you around like-minded people, and we're going to say, you need to deliver something different and innovative. Our hope is that we can scale these in some way, and that's why I'm talking to you here today, and we are all over the country all the time talking about these kinds of things. Taking the classrooms from this kind that we're in today into more spaces like this, and having a very much a focus on the actual individuals involved, not only our students, but how our students interact with the rest of the world. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to take them. Yeah.
So I'm going to use your, learn from the public as much as ask a question. So on your click beetle slide, you have a leaf hopper instead of a click beetle.
Right.
Second, I wanted to ask you, you have a...
There's a click beetle experiment, there is a leaf hopper experiment, and then there's a swimmer experiment, and then there's a flyer experiment, and then there's a couple of them. So that was, I don't teach that class, so kind of just guessing here.
But so the question is, you have these projects like the Stoves for Guatemala, right? Mm-hmm. How do you build into the curriculum the sort of global needs and understanding of where the students can have an impact in their engineering design in countries like Guatemala or third world countries where there's specific engineering solutions that would be great? How do they acquire this awareness of needs?
I think a lot of that comes from our requirement that students engage in a broad and deep arts and humanities background, both on our campus and on other campuses. I think that our students do a reasonably good job of thinking broadly because we expect them to, right in the sophomore year, interact with people that they don't know and in demographics that they are not currently in. So they are all college students. None of our user groups are ever college students, right? They're bartenders, the homeless, or toll booth workers, park rangers, things and people that our students hopefully have very little connection to. And so their ability to kind of both empathize and insert themselves into the life and kind of arc of people that they're not familiar with is a skill we're trying to build. And so hopefully when they see, okay, Guatemala, I've never been there, I never had a stove in my house, okay, that's fine. But I know how to understand the values and the problems and try to apply my engineering knowledge in that context. And so I think hopefully they're a lot less scared about getting out there and trying to understand. And they're not just saying, oh, I don't know these people, so I'm not going to try. And so hopefully, and the idea of globalization is one that we're trying to embrace as much as possible. We have a number of classes this year that center on affordable design. And so designed for developing countries, designed for different kinds of communities that are, and we have built partnerships with places in India and places in all over the world over the past year to try to bring those experiences into the classroom and put our students in those experiences abroad. And so affordable design, I mean, building iPods for the first world nation is an interesting job, right? But it's not as impactful as doing something that could impact billions of people perhaps. And so I think that's something we're really trying to take to heart right now, and we have developed some curriculum and outreach around that area just in this past year or so.
I want to sort of remind everybody about the structure of our conference. We've got a breakout session that Mark will be leading in just a little while. And so unless there are urgent questions, we'll sort of move on to our next speaker. But let's also thank Mark for a wonderful talk.
This program is protected by a copyright and may not be redistributed in whole or in part without the express written consent of Rice Digital Media Services.